So, we have recently reviewed the Sony 85mm f1.4 G Master Mark II lens, and it really got me thinking about why I love shooting with 85mm so much. I've actually talked before about how I think it's probably one of my favorite focal lengths to shoot with, and a lot of the time it's easy to just think of portraiture when you think of an 85mm lens, and absolutely that makes a lot of sense. It's great for that kind of stuff, but there's a lot of reasons to shoot with that focal length across a whole variety of different genres. Let's talk about them. Let's talk about why it's such a powerful focal length. Let's roll the intro first. It's Tutorial Tuesday. Welcome back to Tutorial Tuesday, where every Tuesday we bring you a brand new, fresh photography tutorial. This week, we're taking a break from the photo editing in Lightroom and all that kind of stuff to talk about 85mm and why it's such a powerful focal length and why you can use it for so much more than portraiture, and why I think, to be honest, it's a staple lens to have in your kit bag. There is so much more to 85mm than just those beautiful portraits that you can get. Yes, you can get a lovely shallow depth of field, and yes, that is lovely in a certain type of portrait, but the actual focal length allows you to do so much. So first and foremost, 85mm is a fairly zoomed in feeling focal length, right? It is punched in quite nicely, and that does a few different things. First of all, it gives you the ability to get a nice shallow depth of field. Yes, you can shoot at f1.4, but even if you have one of the cheaper, more affordable options, an f1.8 85mm lens, or even if you're shooting on a 70-200 around that kind of focal length, you're still going to be able to get a very nice blurred background shooting with a stop down aperture. Even if you shoot something at f4, you're still going to be able to achieve that kind of look to your image because you're going to get a lot more lens compression, right? Zooming in and being at 85mm does afford you more separation between your subject and your background. And that means you are going to be able to get that nice shallow depth of field look to your image. And that's really the tip of the iceberg as to why I think these images look so special and why I think it does allow you to get some really beautiful images. It really hones in on the subject of your photo, whether that is a person, which is why it's so good for portraiture, or whether that's the subject in the landscape. Now, we've talked in the past about how important it is to define the subject in your shot. Easy to do with a portrait because, of course, the subject is the subject. But in something like a landscape, in something like street photography, where maybe there needs to be a little bit more thought put into what is the subject of the landscape, right? What is the subject of this street shot? An 85mm lens can really push you to actually identify that because it's so honed in on whatever it is you're shooting. You can't rely on just a beautiful view or a beautiful street scene. You need to define that subject. And I think that's why 85mm lens is such an important focal length to shoot with. It really forces you to pick out that subject. And because it does that, you then start thinking about framing, what's in the scene, what you're going to include in the shot, and what you're going to leave out. And with that slightly more zoomed in feel, it's easier to move yourself around, to actually remove things from the frame, to reframe, to change up how you're shooting the actual scene. I've said in the past that a wider focal length, something like 35mm, is much more about where your subject is, right? So that's true whether it's portraits, landscape, whatever it might be. You're bringing in much more of the environment, the view around your subject. But 85mm is so much more about who that subject is, right? Whether it's a landscape shot and you're really focusing in on that one element that is your subject, whether it is a portrait, and you're, again, really focusing in. For example, this portrait, which, yeah, I get it. I like to include this in the odd video here and there. I don't hate the photo, if I'm totally honest with you, but I took this with an 85mm lens. Now, I use that lens for a few different reasons. I think it's particularly flattering as a portrait lens, but it also allowed me to really remove a lot of other clutter that was in the room that I was shooting in. If I show you a slightly wider version of this shot, you can see that there are lots of boxes, lots of other things in the room. I was in the middle of moving. And the truth is, 85mm allows me to cut through all of that and really just hone in on the subject, which in this case was me. It is so easy to be in full control of your background and your surroundings of the shot with 85mm, because even if you just move 1 foot to the left, 1 foot to the right, forwards, backwards, you are now completely changing what's in the frame, what's in the background, because of that kind of zoomed in feel. That gives you so much control and versatility over what you want to include and over the feel of the shot. For example, I often shoot portraits really quite tight. I get in reasonably close, but actually with an 85mm lens, sometimes if you pull back, because of the lens compression, you actually really compress that scene closer together. So you get the background almost pulled towards the lens. You've got your subject there, but still with some beautiful separation of subject and background. It's such a powerful way to shoot. So for me, it is my go-to lens, certainly for portraiture generally, but actually I love taking this out for landscape, for street photography, where again, I can use that same technique to hone in on my subject and really frame everything around them. But even things like food photography, product photography, and even video as well. Now, this one I'm shooting about 35mm, but absolutely, I would shoot outside where I've got a little bit more space. I love shooting about 85mm just to get a bit more of a cinematic feel to my footage. You know, you're getting that lens compression again, separation of subject and background, and it can look really powerful and really special. Ultimately for me, it comes down to the fact that the lens forces you to pick out that subject and really commit to framing your shot around them. No matter the genre, no matter what you're shooting, you have to pick a subject and you have to go with it. And it forces you to engage your photography brain, start thinking about framing, composition, what you're going to include, what you're not going to include. And all of those things will make you a better photographer and probably give you a better end result as well. So I'm not saying that shooting with an 85mm lens makes you a better photographer, but I'm not saying that. Let me know what you think. Are there any other reasons you don't think I've talked about here that you love 85mm? And do you know what I'd love to hear as well? If you have any reasons you love a wider focal length that are opposed to everything I've said here, is there something about shooting something like 16mm or 24mm that you love? I'd love to hear about that, because I always gravitate to these slightly longer focal lengths. I love them for all the reasons I've just talked about, but I'm always super keen to hear about other people's experiences and why you might love a wider focal length, or do you agree with me? Let me know all of it down in the comments. I'd love to hear about all of it. Otherwise, you can see a full list of all the kit we used for all these photos for this video down in the description, including that new Sony 85mm lens as well. Don't forget to like and subscribe, because there's new content all the time. I will see you in the next video, but until then, as always, thanks for watching.